I am 7 and 10 years old, and suddenly I am queen. I cannot do whatever I like. George!
What?
Say something!
She was 7 and 10 years old as she sarcastically put it herself in the Bridgerton Story prequel. She was raised to one day become a queen of some European state and knew perfectly well what was expected of her in terms of duty and social protocol. Yet, at the same time, she was just a kid who barely knew anything about the real life with its deceitful turns and twists they don't prepare you at the etiquette lessons. The image of mature Queen Charlotte caught everyone's attention already in the first season of the Bridgerton series by Netflix. Although it is clearly stated by its creators that the series explores the field of the so-called alternative history, many of us were still intrigued whether the real Charlotte of Mecklenburg-Strelitz was really of a mixed race, and what happened to her husband, and could anything from the series be coming from the real life of the longest-serving queen consort indeed? And as if reply to those questions, Netflix releases the whole standalone prequel dedicated to her story. So, in this video, we will look at the most curious details about the fictional Queen Charlotte mentioned in the series and see what was real and what is a mere fantasy of a screenwriter. Yes, I will make a separate video about her no less mysterious husband, King George III, so you may like to subscribe not to miss it coming.
She is very brown.
I did say she had more blood, Mum.
You did not say she would be that brown.
But I did say she had more blood.
Very brown.
So, the race. Yes, that was the first interesting question that pops up in the mind. You may get surprised, yet there were certain real-life facts that could justify the spectacular plot line of the racial great experiment, where black subjects of the crown started to get equal rights and privileges alongside the white Brits. It appears that the notions of her mixed bloodlines all come from this fabulous grand portrait in coronation robes by Alan Ramsay. He pictured the young Charlotte of Mecklenburg-Strelitz shortly after her becoming the Queen Consort of Great Britain in 1762. Look at her facial features here, those beautiful big eyes, full lips, the non-miniature nose. There is a certain flair of mixed-race beauty here, right? This idea of her being other than the white race was first expressed a century after her death. Some Jamaican writer J. Rogers in his pretentious 1940 book introduced this theory and brought that portrait by Ramsay as a bulletproof statement. It was then grabbed by tons of experts, mostly self-proclaimed ones, and exploited to this or that success until today. Let's try to find any support for this notion. The real Charlotte was a minor German princess. Back in the day, girls like her were the perfect choice for the sons of other European monarchs, just like the boys of her rank would have been considered a good match for the daughters of the sovereign. They were of a royal origin, well prepared and suited for the social roles they were born for. And what's important, they would have few ambitions of their own, while at the same time strengthen the political and military alliances. Such marriages were a popular strategy in, say, British or Russian empires for centuries. That explains the outspoken notion that all European royal families are distant and not so distant relatives even today.
Someone who can make lots of babies, someone who can read, someone with all the social graces, someone with a royal bloodline. That is all they required. It is not an honour.
Back to Charlotte. She was coming from the rather small duchy in northern Germany, then part of the Holy Roman Empire, which was created in those territories only some 40 years before Charlotte's birth. Interestingly, it ceased its existence in its form even before her death. Charlotte's father came from the House of Mecklenburg, its North German line of Slavic origin, the longest ruling families of Europe. They were related to the Swedish, Norwegian and Dutch royal families, yet I couldn't find any link to some potential mixed-race marriage that would theoretically manifest in Charlotte in that portrait. And here is her mother, painted by the same Alan Ramsay in about 1769. Do you see some familiar traits that shine through that mysterious likeness of Charlotte? Interestingly, this portrait is a posthumous one. It was commissioned by her now Queen daughter as a memory and is still hanging on the wall in the Queen's Gallery in Buckingham Palace. Scholars believe that Ramsay must have been looking at this lifetime portrait of the future Queen's mother by his German colleague. In any case, looking at the background of Charlotte's mother, there is nothing suspicious in it as well. Nevertheless, some supporters of the black origins of Charlotte dig down 15 generations back and found some trace of the Portuguese royal, who in his turn was rumored to have illegitimate connections with some North African woman. 15 generations back. That means 500 years in between Charlotte and the only theoretical possible influx of black ancestry, which in turn could not be proved. So it turns out that all the fuss comes from that early likeness by Ramsay, and numerous copies made after that portrait and widely distributed across the country. You have seen her pictures from different years by other painters, and none of them repeats those facial features exaggerated by Ramsay. In fact, there is another brilliant portrait of Charlotte while still a German princess. Scholars believe it was made to commemorate the citizens' betrothal to George III in June 1761. It belonged to the hand of a lesser-known German painter, Johann Ziesenis. Look at her here, and then compare her face with the one immortalized by Ramsay. They look like two different people. Actually, all of her later portraits, which were not painted as copies of Ramsay, show her way closer to this 17-year-old likeness. So I guess we can safely consider this case closed. Her race in the series is a part of the fictional realm only and has no factual proof from real life, which makes the series concept even better, I think.
To make that clear, we shall expand the guest list for the wedding and add to her court.
Are you saying...
The king is saying.
Myth number 2. English language. It is an interesting fact indeed that they didn't include it in the series. Charlotte didn't speak English upon her arrival for the wedding. She was educated at home by the poet and private tutor. She spoke French but learned English only after her marriage. Curiously, there are two totally different notions about Charlotte's education in arts and sciences. Some say the girl received a very mediocre education, and at the same time, other contemporaries described her mother, Elizabeth Albertina, as an excellent mother and state that all her children enjoyed a comprehensive education, learned Latin, Greek and French, and read books by classical authors in their original language. Hard to say how it was in reality, yet the commonly accepted theory today agrees that her education was more or less equal to that of a daughter of an English gentleman. That means she received some basic knowledge in natural history and botany, while her tutors mostly focus on household management and religion, later followed by princely duties and court life.
The king realizes that the wedding is in 6 hours?
Well, who does not want to attend a royal wedding?
There is another curious fact about her arrival to England they omitted in the Netflix story. The thing is, she had to travel to England by sea. To collect her, Britain sent to the German shores a whole fleet with the yacht renamed Royal Charlotte for the occasion. It was accompanied by a flotilla consisting of 4 other royal yachts, escorted by 6 ships of war. For several days of the journey, the fleet weathered 3 severe storms. It was reported that the princess, whose first sea journey it was, described the ocean as the élément terrible, terrible element. And you can imagine how exhausted she was by that voyage, and then the final stage of her journey to London by coach with the royal procession with eager crowds greeting them along the way.
I am forced into a ludicrous gown, so stylish that if I move too much I might be sliced and stabbed to death by my undergarments. Oh, how joyful it is to be a lady.
So when they finally arrived at St. James's Palace, it was reported that Charlotte threw herself at King's feet upon meeting him, but that he raised her up, embraced her, and led her into the palace where the royal couple was to be married by the Archbishop of Canterbury that evening. Her beloved elder brother Adolphus Frederick IV accompanied her on that voyage, yet obviously it wasn't that almost private journey as shown in the first episode. Charlotte was indeed very close to Adolphus, although after becoming the queen she did never return to Mecklenburg-Strelitz and never met him again, although they corresponded regularly until his death.
Lady Danbury, I need to know what is going on at Buckingham House. I need a trusted ear.
The king's mother, the Dowager Princess Augusta, did keep a close eye on young Charlotte in the first years of her marriage to the British sovereign. This detail was evidently picked up by the Bridgerton screenwriters. She also appointed Charlotte's staff, though the serious Brimsley, at least his personality, is obviously a totally fictional personage. No wonder Augusta expected them to report on the life of Her Majesty the Queen. We will talk more about her in my next video about the king.
Please speak freely. No one else does.
Do not try that again in front of society. It will cause scandal.
Interestingly, Charlotte did have a close confidant of her own, Juliane von Schwellenberg, or Madame Schwellenberg, who came with her from Germany and eventually became her most powerful favorite, acting as an essential filter between the queen and the courtiers. So there is some vague similarity with Lady Danbury, especially in the notion that they both were coming from the same roots, African ancestry in the series and German roots in real life.
Dearests, can you marry a dollhouse? Can you embroider me an heir? Then shush.
Another striking fact about the Queen was exploited in the series to the fullest. Imagine, together with King George III, they had 15 children, and 13 of them survived to actually grow up into the adult princes and princesses. However, in A Bridgerton Story, we learn that none of them were eager to marry and have legitimate children to take the throne after the death of their father, and this way Britain itself was on the verge of a royal crisis. How far is that from reality?
Has anyone created a baby yet? Is there any fruit to show for all of my efforts on your behalf?
Looks like the truth lies somewhere in the middle. Out of 15 children, there were 6 daughters: Charlotte, Augusta, Sophia, Elizabeth, Mary, Sophia, and Amelia. The Queen was very conscious of their proper upbringing and made sure her girls were educated better than was usual for younger women of the day. At the same time, both the King and the Queen strangely preferred that they didn't marry and rejected many of the suitable proposals from foreign royal families. As a result, the sisters became involved with courtiers and equerries, and only 3 of them married in rather well-advanced years for the epoch, and the rest stayed by their mother's side instead. No wonder none of her daughters had surviving legitimate issue.
I think what Georgie is trying to say, Mother, is that
his brothers continue to fail in their duties as you have failed in yours.
The eldest son of George and Charlotte, George, Prince of Wales, is pictured as a rather phlegmatic, reactive personage who obeys his mother on her first request. While in reality there were serious tensions between the two for the regency over the mentally ill king.
Now, Georgie, be a good boy and approve your brothers' marriages.
I approve.
Again, more about it in the video about George III. Anyways, he eventually succeeded his father and became the next king, George IV. Unfortunately, just like shown in the series, continuing scandals surrounded his marriage with Caroline of Brunswick. Upon her husband's accession to the throne, Caroline returned from her self-imposed exile in Italy to claim her position as queen. However, due to her alleged infidelity, the new king excluded her from coronation and sought a divorce, and Caroline was put on trial in the House of Lords. George's only daughter died young at the age of 21. This is shown in the series. Then the second son of Charlotte and George III, Prince Frederick, died childless, so when the time came, the crown was passed on to their third son, William, who became King William IV. He had many kids, but a tiny detail, none of them were legitimate. So the real Queen Charlotte had every reason to worry about the future of the British crown.
I am stating facts. The princesses have had no babies. The princes have had a record number of babies. Illegitimate whore babies.
However, given the number of her own children, the dynasty wasn't supposed to lose its position anytime soon. And after the death of William IV in 1837, the throne was inherited by the 18-year-old Victoria, the daughter of already deceased fourth son of Charlotte and George. As history showed, her reign brought peace and stability to Britain for over 60 years.
A girl is wonderful. And a strong queen is just what this country needs.
And let's cover up this lineup of myths with some quick and joyful ones. And first of all, did Charlotte really have Pomeranian dogs? Yes, she did, although it all happened the opposite way other than shown in the series. It wasn't George who gifted Charlotte a Pomeranian dog as a companion, but Charlotte herself traveled to Europe together with her two creamy white Pomeranians. She is said to have gifted dogs to other members of the family later in her life, and the overall tradition of Pomeranians at court was apparently launched by her and happily taken over by her son King George IV and then Queen Victoria.
Bravo. Play another.
A Bridgerton Story brings up a quick episode with young Mozart playing the piano in the Queen's drawing room for the pleasure of the limited number of her guests. And yes, this happened in reality. Charlotte and George were avid supporters of all things German when it came to arts, music in particular. In 1764, they invited then 8-year-old Wolfgang Amadeus to England, where he stayed with his family for over a year. He obviously gave private concerts at the court and even accompanied the Queen when she sang, and later composed 6 sonatas and dedicated them to Charlotte.
What did I say? More color. It is Christmas.
It's amusing, yet it was Queen Charlotte who is said to have introduced the Christmas tree to Britain and its colonies. At first, she decorated only a single branch according to common Christmas tradition in her native Mecklenburg-Strelitz. The whole royal family and royal household were gathering around it, sang carols and received gifts. She then expanded this tradition and began to decorate the whole tree. One day she threw a large Christmas party when she invited children of all families in Windsor, and the tree was richly decorated with toys, fruits, tinsel and small wax candles. Everybody enjoyed it so much that no wonder this brilliant idea spread across the country and beyond. I hope this overview of myths and facts about Queen Charlotte helped you navigate better in this time period, and enjoy the Bridgerton series with its prequels, sequels and what else shall follow to the fullest. However, I didn't even scratch the surface of the most important part of Queen's life, her love for King George III and the real personal tragedy of his mental illness. How true was that to reality? I uncovered this and other curious facts related to the king in my next video. Hope to see you there. Bye!
I promise you, I am neither a troll nor a beast. Just George.